Resident Evil is a very important thing to me in my late childhood. It was my introduction to the horror genre as a whole. With the remake of Resident Evil 2 specifically, that came out early into my time in high school. I played it pretty much every day after I got it for hours a day. I beat it several times over on multiple difficulties back when all I had to my gaming space and setup was a PS4 and a beat up old Nintendo Switch. It was and remains to me a magical experience of bloody horror. So, come with me as I go over a franchise I love so dearly throughout all of the Resident Evil games I have ever played and beaten. I will not be fully going over every game I've played because there's a bunch that I have not beaten yet out of just not wanting to ever run out of things to do with this franchise. Without further ado, let's put on a show.
Resident Evil 2 is a classic example of horror by dread. In layman's terms, horror is induced by a deep-seated fear of what's to come, but also horror by physical threat. Resident Evil is a sledgehammer when it comes to how it handles horror a lot of the time. Very blunt, very direct, very in your face about it. It isn't very psychological in most ways. Very direct, physical. Very, very much so, like a slasher film. There's hardly any psychological horror or anything beyond creepiness and dread in the original sets of horror-centric RE games. But they tend to make up for this by creating unsettling atmospheres, creepy environments that you cycle between the moment you feel at ease. Heart-stopping scenarios, giant stalkers that chase you down, and of course the zombies themselves, looking to take a bite out of your flesh and make you one with the horde. These things, I think, are the core gameplay elements Resident Evil 2 has at a fundamental level in the remake of Resident Evil 2, and they execute them extremely well. In essence, it is Resident Evil in a nutshell. This is what the entire series is usually about. Resident Evil 2 is a masterclass of environmental storytelling, inducing dread through multiple vectors such as lore files and set pieces, along with, of course, the core of survival horror gameplay, which the original game invented all those years ago. It all meshes together so well to create an experience that feels cohesive and satisfying even now, looking back on it all these years later, since I have played it originally. It isn't without flaws, though. Its writing is not the best, if I'm being honest. Voice acting could be better, and some of the set pieces are definitely stronger than others, looking at you, William Birkin, G Phase 1. But the ending segment as well is easily the weakest of the environments you visit throughout all of Resident Evil 2. But I have always thought it was more solid than people make it out to be. A lot of people complain about it a little much. That's very common in Resident Evil's community. Its community is not the best, I will be the first to tell you that. They whine a lot, they complain a lot. They can be really toxic. They can also be really creepy. It's such a broad community, going back decades of years. There's a lot of people in it, meaning that it gets diluted into toxicity a lot. You have to kind of deal with that as a Resident Evil fan. So being a Resident Evil fan online is sometimes not the best. It's not the best experience if you're looking to mingle with the community half the time. Leon and Claire in Resident Evil 2 are remarkably casual, speaking of writing. They're almost entirely unfazed in cutscenes showing very little fear or dread in the hellish scenario that is the Raccoon City outbreak. It's the opposite of how the player is made to feel through tones, set pieces, environment, all of the stuff I've mentioned before. It is the main thing I think that holds RE2 back so far as writing goes, is, the actual cutscenes and story as it's given to you directly, not as it's given to you through files and an environment. Leon isn't an agent yet in the second game. Claire is just a stubborn college student looking for a big brother. They should really not be so casual given the circumstances that they find themselves in this game. They should be very afraid, they should be very unprepared, they should be more panicked. On to other notes though. The two different campaigns and the two B scenarios are a massive upside in replayability and content that's just fun to play. However, the item usage by the A scenario character is not present from the original. Back in the original, whatever you did with the A scenario character would carry over for the B scenario character. So you took this ammo box, the B scenario character wouldn't get that ammo box, so on and so forth. I personally think that could have been introduced as a toggle option, but it doesn't really matter, I don't think. I believe in the modern scape of how game design is, right? And how most gamers are actually pretty casual these days, and it's not so much of a stringent hobby by so few people. I do think that hitting the cutting room floor was a good choice, even if it's not my preferred one. I would have preferred that to be a toggle rather than it would have been, just gotten rid of, because it's something that is a cool feature at the end of the day. Again, modern game design. It was technically the right call from the perspective of a dev, I think. Now, extra modes were a fun addition. Oh boy. There was a bunch of extra modes given to RE2. Yes, a handful of story-based content did hit cutting room floor. Very small things were changed, like the IVs and so much. But the extra modes were pretty cool. They really didn't add too terribly much, and most of them were non-canon, but they were very entertaining. Like, the ones that involved characters in the background, like, what was it? Kendo and such. Like, they were all really fun. Now, above all, though, the fourth survivor mode is the main one people talk about. It's the main canon mode. There's the Ghost Survivor, which was canon, and then the fourth survivor, which in that one you play as a fan favorite character, a UBCS agent called Hunk, trying to extract from the city right before the ICBM wipes it from the map. This mode is more action heavy. It asks the player to carefully manage items, to slip past hordes, and keep just enough ammo to move on to the next area. It is the most difficult challenge Resident Evil 2 has to offer by and far. It is probably one of its highest points beyond the base campaign. Leon and Hunk in particular have both recently gotten more spotlight in the new Resident Evil Requiem. Given the trailers for the upcoming Code Veronica remake, I'm very hopeful we'll see more of Hunk, because to this day we don't know much about him, and he hasn't appeared much in canon actual appearances. More often than not, we see him in non-canon games, like Operation Raccoon City and the such. Actually, I don't know if it was Operation Raccoon City, but it was a game that focused heavily on him that is technically non-canon. But of all of the characters in Resident Evil, he is the most interesting to me because of all of the unknowns. There's so much we don't know, so much that's just interesting about him because he is so well suited to killing zombies and monsters in this world. I would even wager to say he's probably the best suited to killing bioweapons even beyond the protagonists that typically show up in these games. Like in Requiem in particular, he had a lot of chances to kill Leon and he didn't take it. I can point those out to you, but I won't. That is for another video that I will make on Hawk eventually. And with that, we move on to Resident Evil 3. Resident Evil 3's remake is controversial, to say the least. Some hate it and some love it, and frankly, no matter the side, I see why. It plays kind of like a dream game to me, with a time dodge mechanic and a bigger emphasis on action without fully detracting the horror experience. I'm somebody who really likes fluid action, so I can't hate it, right? It's fun to play, I can't be that mad. However, it does detract a little bit from the original experience thanks to the dodge. The original was a bit heavier on the action than the games that preceded it. So it made sense that feel still present here, that it's a little bit more action heavy. Jill Valentine is kind of a joy to play as in this game, having a handful of cheesy one-liners a la Leon from RE4. She's kinda got a few of those, but nowhere near as many. Her writing in this game makes a little more sense than Leon's and Claire's from the original take of Resident Evil 2 and the remake, because well, she's seen it all before in the Spencer Mansion, survived, and is thrust back into an apocalypse. So her being a little less, terrified makes sense. However, Resident Evil 3 has a ton of baggage that really does keep it down. And it is mainly because it's criminally short and underdeveloped. It's a crying shame, too. The pursuer that defined the archetype in horror games and survival horror was Nemesis. Nemesis was so important that Resident Evil 3's original tagline was Resident Evil 3 Nemesis. He was practically invalidated by the dodge mechanic in this game, and made into a non-issue by people like me who have the skill to be able to just press the right bumper and just become immortal. All the initially unlocked difficulties, right? The dodge window changes depending on the difficulty, but all the ones that are initially unlocked, because there's a lot of unlockables in this game, but for all of the ones that are available off-rip, it is way too easy. Nemesis is way too trivialized for what he's supposed to be. Entire sections of this game have been cut, ones that really should never have been, like the clock tower, for instance. Most areas have little to find or do in them. You can clear an area way too fast. And they're the choices too. Like the original take of Resident Evil 3 had like quick time events where you make a choice. Do you do this or do you do that? While something's usually breathing down your neck, which really added to replay value. And since those were not present, that just added to the issue. I don't really have much more to say about this game beyond those talking points. Its gameplay is very solid, very engaging, but everything else, being the game world, cut content from the original, a pursuer with no tangible threat at lower difficulties, and a 2-hour runtime at best, if you know what you're doing, really pulls the experience down as like a whole. However, its biggest strength is its replay value and the challenge unlock system. It makes a very completionist friendly game where you can go and get your unlocks based on points from doing challenges and go to a store and buy whatever you want directly. You don't have to do something specific to get an infinite ammo rocket launcher, for instance. And that is its biggest strength. It incentivizes you and rewards you for continuing to play the game, which is actually decent replay value to me. Because you can get all you want out of the game, but then you can go back and get some new guns, new weapons, some cool new stuff to play with. And that is how I feel about third entry as far as the remake goes. I haven't finished the originals yet. I will get to that in time. But up next is Resident Evil 4. Okay, this is the big one. The Resident Evil game notorious for defining a new genre, for fusing action to horror seamlessly with a host of one-liners and extremely strong action set pieces that define a new genre of horror. Resident Evil perfected in this entry and failed to capture again until the 8th installment. Even still, Village didn't exactly replicate it in full. It had moments where it definitely leaned more one way or another, but Requiem definitely, I don't know if I would say surpassed it, but it did something right. I have played both the original and the remake of this game. It is the only one that I can say I've played the original version through to the end multiple times and the remake version through to the end multiple times. But my praise for both are almost exactly identical. Save for improvements I think the remake had over the original. Generally, in the most part, the remake was a vast improvement. So I am going with the remake version for most of my talking points about this game. Resident Evil 4 is horror by desperation over the sense of dread. Dread is no longer much of a focal point in this entry in either iteration. The tension and fear more so comes from overwhelming odds against hordes of enemies that just don't stop coming. It's a far cry from how RE usually does its gameplay. In Resident Evil 2, one zombie with a high health pool was a problem early on. In RE4, comparatively, one Ganado, which are tougher and more dangerous than zombies, isn't really much to you. But they are able to use weapons. They're able to strategize and flank, to mob. They're able to mutate and change into terrible forms, all while coming in massive hordes. Some variants die instantly to bright lights from flashbang grenades, namely the ones where the parasite is exposed from the body. And those variants are very, very dangerous. Many of them have instant kill attacks. And there are other instant kill melee fighters like Salvador's, Bella Sisters, the Berserkers, these ones are not necessarily like the ones with the flashbangs are useful at, but they are still high health pool and very, very dangerous. The knife has a parry, and the parry is good for these moments, but the knife has durability if flashbangs run out, and using ammo too laissez-faire will find you running dry if you aren't hitting shots and being efficient. That is what Horror by Desperation really is. Leon has access to melee strikes and takedowns in this game, some with a knife, but many with kicks and grapples. You usually get this by shooting at the legs or staggering an enemy first. This shakes up RE gameplay a whole lot more and has become a mainstay in any action entry. It shakes up the gameplay to a massive point from the original take. It gives the player a lot of agency to fight hordes of bioweapons. However, the hordes still get progressively bigger, more well-armed, more varied. A lot of different variants become more dangerous, more massive, more scary as time goes on. And this is something that I don't think a single Resident Evil game since has really fully captured again. Requiem came close. 5 was a little closer to the mark than some. 6 was far off the mark. 6. We'll get a video about 6. I promise you that. Yeah, as the hordes do get bigger, you do get better armaments. You get better guns, you get upgrades, you get more tricks, tools, all that. Even armor. Which I don't think any game but Requiem has really brought back as an armor system. I think 5 had one though. RE4 has very phenomenal boss fights, and easily the best set pieces in any Resident Evil title. The village at the start, for instance, isn't iconic for no reason. There's a reason you hear people say that again and again and again. It is legitimately RE4's gameplay loop in a nutshell. It's what works about Resident Evil when it fuses horror and action in its purest state. And it introduces the way it does all of these things extremely well as a tutorial idea, but also just as a just example of good gameplay. Like, it is just good gameplay at its core. It is practically my favorite set piece in all of gaming, just because it does its job so well and lives up to the reputation it cultivated over the years. Every boss fight, every set piece, everything is just greatly designed from back to front of this game. Probably the one thing you could give bad points to RE4 on back in the day was Ashley's AI. Like, not only was the original version's AI not bad, like I really don't think it was that bad, but in the new game, she's been vastly improved. The water room is still largely annoying at times because, well, the rifle ammo is low. Like, it's hard to hit shots and protect her whenever she's off flipping the switches. But that's kind of intended by that room's gameplay design. It's kind of meant to be that way, so I expected it to be like that. Like, of all Resident Evil games, of all of them, when I'm asked for first-time recommendations, Resident Evil 2, 7, and 4 always come up. 4. Resident Evil 4, to me, is its best showcase of action horror. It is a very, very good fusion of both. If you're looking to have a little bit of agency, but also be a little bit scared by a couple of things here and there, 4 is great for it. Resident Evil 2 and 7 are good for straight up horror. I think 7 does horror better than almost every other entry in the series, save for Requiem. And I think that 2 is a really close second for that. Both with their own strengths and weaknesses, though. They both have their own fair share of baggage and their fair share of big punchy points. But again, nowadays, in the year of our Lord, there is a brand new Resident Evil title for the best introduction to what RE gameplay is all about, and is now and forever going to be my recommendation for a starting point to Resident Evil in terms of gameplay. Let's move on to Resident Evil 9 Requiem. Resident Evil 9. Oh boy. Resident Evil 9. It is perhaps the best entry in the franchise in both departments of action and horror, and I take that very seriously when I say that. I have played the most critically acclaimed games in the franchise. All of the ones everybody argues for being the best. And in my opinion, and with a lot of evidence I can point to back that up, Resident Evil 9 is the best showcase of action and horror both in Resident Evil's entire franchise history. Capcom has finally mastered the lightning in a bottle that they caught in Resident Evil 4, but instead of it being in one character, they split it between two. And that was a revolutionary decision. Leon's gameplay in Resident Evil 9 is brutal, gruesome, and chunky. It's a lot more brutal than he was in 4. He is very clearly used to killing things at this point. He is very used to fighting bioweapons. He is surgical with how he takes them down. And he is, while chunky and moving very heavy-handed, smooth as butter. It is practiced precision. You can feel it. As a martial artist of 5 years, Leon's gameplay is very, very satisfying to watch, let alone to play. It is a treat. With him being older, though, the theme of desperation still persists from 4. It's not as, well, I won't say it's not as strong. It is actually pretty strong here. He's used to this life, but his prime years are slipping away, making his encounters feel just as much of a mad scramble to survive as Resident Evil 4 felt. Meanwhile, newcomer Grace Ashcroft holds nothing back in the vein of a horror-centric experience. Oh, it is gold. It is the best horror experience I have ever seen in a Resident Evil game, objectively. I can't rate anything else higher than this. The original wasn't this good as far as like sheer horror value. I'm not going to downplay its importance, but the original was just not this good. The technology, the writing, the setup, the atmosphere wasn't there. It's here in this game. That is for sure. Grace Ashcroft takes everything that worked from every aspect of the series. The first, second, the third, the fourth, and nothing from the fifth or the sixth. They kind of didn't apply. Seventh, eighth even, including the psychological horror that they once went down. And it all comes together into this game and her story. She really is a new type of lightning in a bottle for Resident Evil since 4. She's also among the most well-written characters here. Her story is actually really phenomenal. Like, of all Resident Evil characters, her story is very interesting, it's very meaningful, it's very fun to watch, and she's, in a horror scenario, written incredibly well. She is, like, really one of the best characters in this series, in my own personal opinion, and I've known her for a very short amount of time. I think her and Ethan are two of the better written characters in this franchise, but I think she is like a better written version of Ethan Winters, because they lean even more into Grace just being a normal woman in a Resident Evil setting who really is not prepared for it. Like, not to mention, there are some themes of psychological horror that are present in this specific RE game related to Grace Ashcroft. Like, Grace has a few sections that are very psychological heavy. It's not too terribly much compared to like things like House Beneviento from Resident Evil 8, which we'll get to that in another video. But it is enough. It's all enough to make Grace's segments feel incredible. I was expecting to be like, ugh, when I get to a Grace segment, and then beg for Leon, which I'll be honest, I was itching for Leon when I was playing Grace, since they make you play through her first. However, it was still a very strong and engaging experience, and I don't regret it. And I love it. I love it. Leon's segments are often more action-oriented and set-piece heavy, relying on the tried-and-true RE formula of desperation I mentioned before in the 4 segment. Ammo can run low, so grenades and utility, yada yada yada, but the horror is a bit less so, given Leon isn't afraid in the writing almost at all, at least not in your typical sense. He's not afraid of the bioweapons. He's afraid of failure. That is his character theme, that is his archetype, that's his story, that's what he's facing here. He's facing his greatest failure. Failing to save people as he did in Resident Evil 2 in his return to Raccoon City in this game. That provides more of a tonal depth to these action scenes, especially when his age and body seem to fail him and this disease taking over his body begins to take him. It makes him feel weak and mortal, which Resident Evil always needed more of when it came to protagonists like Leon, because he felt very untouchable in a lot of other media. Even in Resident Evil 4, while he's infected, he still felt untouchable for much of that game, but here, it felt like he was on borrowed time. And they really drove that home. If I was to sum up the entirety of Resident Evil 9, because boy, you can tell, I want to talk more about this game. And I will one day. Oh, I will. I love this game. But if I was to sum it up in simple terms, it would be a greatest hits album for the series as a whole. It is a love letter to everything Resident Evil's done right. Everything that works about the action, and everything that works about the horror, wrapped into an extremely fun and exciting package. I also have to admit, it has some of the best story of any Resident Evil game in the main lineup. Mostly told through character backstory and themes, but also laid bare during certain dialogues and story beats. It's Leon confronting his weaknesses and his failures, alongside Grace Ashcroft confronting her fears and insecurities. Also, traumas of her past. Tonally and contextually, it is a masterfully crafted, true work of art, which I can't often give that praise to a Resident Evil game as far as story goes, and its cohesion to the gameplay. RE9 is probably, looking at like a checklist of things that make a good game, it checks more boxes than most of the Resident Evil series, which is mostly just gameplay, horror, action. This one actually has a compelling narrative. I do have one criticism for this game, and it's only really one. I do wish you could choose to start with Leon or Grace after a campaign, and play whoever you feel like at the time, right? Alongside the option of periodically swapping between them for the cohesive narrative that's already present, I'd like that to be a toggle if that was ever an option, because it is nice to play through it the way it was intended. But as it stands, Requiem is perhaps the single strongest Resident Evil entry I've ever played, and it leaves me excited to see where the series is heading next. Especially thanks to the hunk boss fight that was in this game, and the fact that in Resident Evil Code Veronica's remake that's coming out soon, we are going to be getting Hunk showing up probably more than he did in the original game's backdrop, because they very clearly made it that he was the one who kidnapped Claire. I am very excited for this game. I am very excited to see where Resident Evil goes and what is in store for probably my favorite franchise in the years to come. Thank you all so very much for watching me spew words out about my favorite video game series. Oh man, they were words. A lot of words. If you made it this far in, thanks from the very bottom of my heart. YouTube is a childhood dream of mine that I'm loving to live, even if I'm not doing so hot or making any money or having all that many views, right? I enjoy it. That's it. Like, it is an itch to scratch. That's all I need. I'm in this for fun. It's my personal thing I work at with my little community that I'm so thankful for. Every like and comment, it brightens my day in a way that I hope I can brighten yours too, for well, the fact that you guys have made me so happy. It's only fair that I try to do so in return. Thank you all so much, and I will see you in the next video. Bye-bye.